Hello, I'm Biggie Mac. I'm going to talk about my solution to this final puzzle of the 2018 Spacechem Tournament, binary. The puzzle itself is very interesting. You're given an iodine and an osmium input. An iodine is to represent 1, osmium is to represent 0, and you are to take an input from this programmed input and present its binary representation of its atomic number using a consistent encoding across all possible atoms. In this output node, I've shown which tiles I'm going to be using to talk for each bit. So the least significant bit is where I put the hydrogen. Next least significant is where the helium, then the beryllium. So it goes around in a snake sort of like this. And so an osmium in each place is going to represent a 0 in that bit, and then an iodine in each place is going to represent a 1. And I do support all possible atoms 1 through 109, which is the goal of this puzzle. And I do so in 2 reactors, which is not the minimum, as it turns out. The final solutions included 5 different 1-reactor solutions, so major congratulations to everyone who figured it out. A 1-reactor solution requires the nasty trick of having iodine and osmium. You have to ignore one of them and build the other using fusion-fission math. The topology of my solution, I have the iodine and the osmium both feed into this first reactor. So this first reactor's loop is going to be independent of the programmed input. It's going to do the same thing every time. And then the second reactor is going to take in the programmed input and then process the outputs from this one. Why is red not visible? There we go. Process the outputs from this one to determine what goes to the output printer and what goes to the recycler. What I thought was about the simplest approach to this puzzle was to simply make all possible binary representations, 0 up through 127, and then select from them which of the structures is correct. So I've added a pass-through printer here from this first reactor to the second to see what is going through, and you'll see that each binary representation corresponding to this encoding passes through. So we have all zeros, then increment hydrogen, then helium, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice that this is very slow. I'm going to need to have 128 different outputs from this reactor, which you see are taking a couple hundred cycles apiece for every one input grabbed from the processed input. So this is a slow approach, but it allows the solution in 2 reactors, which I was very proud of being able to get pretty much immediately upon seeing this and thinking about this puzzle. And how do you count up in binary in 1 reactor? So I do want to just be looking at blue right now. Let's look at this bottom left quadrant. I think this is a very good representative piece of the solution that talks about how it works. When you're counting up in binary and you're looking at the least significant bit, it's going to toggle for every number. It's going to be 0 for even and 1 for odds. And the next least significant bit is going to be off twice and then on twice as you count up. Next is off 4 times, on 4 times, and then off 8, on 8. So I wanted to make flip-flop loops that capture that exact behavior. This flip-flop right here, if blue enters from above and the flip-flop is off, it's going to hit in beta and add an osmium to the reactor. If blue enters from above and this flip-flop is on, it's going to hit in alpha and add an iodine to the reactor. It's going to reset that flip-flop on its way out 3 times in a row, and then the 4th, when it passes over both these flip-flops, it's going to fail to reset that flip-flop, and so it's going to be effectively toggled. So this small box contains the logic to hit 4 osmium, 4 iodine. This box in the bottom right has the same logic, but an additional flip-flop, so it's 8 osmium, 8 iodine. Here's 16 of each, and here's 32 of each. The logic to handle 1 of each is much simpler. I don't even need the toggle. I just have a flip-flop go up and then down. Red handles, I'll hide blue. Red handles in this large structure the 64 count. You can see that there are 6 flip-flops here that are toggling the state of this flip-flop. Red also has the every 2, which is made slightly differently from the rest. But so I've added, and then the every 1 is blue. Every 0, I bother to add 1 for an always osmium atom just so that I can make it be a 2x4 brick, but I strip off that osmium in the second reactor and recycle it always. Red goes around in this loop and it'll grab at each of the 2 possible points, bond drop, grab bond drop, which will ultimately make a brick of 2x4. To see it in action, blue's provided an osmium and then another osmium. So the first time through it's going to put on all osmiums, and then the second time it's going to increment by 1 in binary. Once you've incremented by 128 in binary, all of the flip-flops in the reactor are reset to their original state. So it is on a loop of 128 distinct outputs corresponding to the numbers 0 through 127 in binary in order counting up. And this is the slow reactor of the two. So this reactor has about 95% downtime, waiting on in beta. Maybe not 95%. I think I slowed it down because I realized I could and just tried to make it look as simple as I could. Basically what happens is red will check whether this atom in the input spot is hydrogen. If so, it's going to move this structure up to the output and put it into the output printer. If not, it leaves it here on the recycler, and then the next time this goes for a loop, it's going to just drop it into the recycler. This pause is unnecessary, actually. I think it was there so that I could place it wherever I wanted, but you can just do that from the controls. And so I guess since the first output in this is hydrogen, we can watch it in action right away. It does have to reject the 0 case, because the 0 is never going to correspond to one of the valid inputs. But then once it finally gets its 1, it checks, oh, that was indeed a hydrogen, so it drops the hydrogen itself in the recycler and then brings the other output up and drops it into the output printer. So we have 1 here for hydrogen. And I won't bother to run this one until the next output because this is the slow version. I improved the solution by a factor of about 3 in cycles, so this is the one that's more intelligible, but my final submission is going to be a little easier to watch. My final submission is also in the scientific binary format, so it has a reactor here designed by the host that'll dispense all the atoms instead of just 8 that you can program, and then a reactor here that counts up to 218. It goes through all atoms in 2 different ways and then hits this pause. Once it hits the pause, that is your official cycles count, and this one runs in 2.13 or 2.151 million cycles, which did win a tie very narrowly over Darius 1, who was also 2.15 million, but slightly, I think 2.159 million. But the way I've done this solution, we have a very familiar first reactor where there's this 16 count toggle, this 8, this 4, this 32. Red doesn't have to handle a 64 count toggle because red is counting, or because this whole reactor on its own is counting only to 64. It has packets of 8 that contain the binary representation of a number between 0 and 63, and then always 1 osmium and then always 1 iodine. And that allows you to take the number that's between 0 and 63 and then tack on the osmium to make an even number, 0 to 127, and replace it with the iodine to make an odd number, 0 to 127. Splitting up the duties this way allowed this whole solution to run quite a bit faster because it only has to pass 512 atoms from this per loop instead of 1024. It also doesn't bother to bond them. It passes them as single atoms to the next reactor. It turned out more convenient to build the structures in this reactor because it had a lot of downtime on the Blue Waldo. The limiting factor on speed for this solution is actually how fast red can subtract 1 from the programmed input. So I reprogrammed it. Usually the first input in this is fluorine, but I wanted to show it as platinum because the way I do subtraction in this is slightly different depending on whether the number is greater than or less than 64. If the number is greater than 64, this red will grab, it'll check whether it's holding a hydrogen, it'll split it off, fuse drop, and then go through that loop 6 times. So if the element that is being tested is greater than 64, after 6 fusions, there's still a hydrogen left over, but it's always going to be at most a hydrogen. And so for that reason, you can still guarantee that n-1 is left dropped here. Now once you get below 64, and I'll go down to who we have here. There's still on dysprosium. That's gadolinium. Oh, I just reset it. Just wanted to press spacebar and my finger's on the wrong button. So here's neodymium and beryllium. Okay, so this is going to become gadolinium. Once it's less than 64, there will be a point in here where it is grabbing a hydrogen directly, and at that point it'll drop it into this other point in the output zone. So we still have n-1 here and hydrogen prepared to output. But I had read, instead of returning back into this loop so that it happens 6 times, I had read toggle this flip-flop, which was a little bit more chaotic. It does turn out to be faster on average. But what it means is that sometimes it'll go through this loop only 5 times. But it'll only go through the loop 5 times if the previous iteration dropped a hydrogen here at the bottom, which means that it's handling a number that's 63 or less. So this loop is safe to do 5 times if you know that you're not handling a number over 64. It also means that for some cases it will add 1 to the number of times it does this loop, but I did check, and on average over all possible inputs it saves about 2% cycles, which is worth it because that's more than the margin I had of victory over Darius 1. So here you can see this reactor building the osmium form and then replacing it with iodine. Neither of them was correct, so it throws it to the output recycler. Now eventually we'll get this down to 1 and we'll see this reactor's output process. I don't believe there's a way to, while a sandbox level is running, bring back the other Waldo's visibility, so that's a little bit sad. But yes, we just saw the output platinum's atomic number in binary, which is 1001110. That is 14 plus 64 is 78. That is correct. There, let's get blue a little bit more vision. Blue's going to be counting to 128 here, and after 128 times through its loop, it's going to add another input alpha. So that is consistent with the fact that it has to process 128 inputs from the left. It also has some logic for, let's see, building the structure, for moving invalid outputs to the recycler. Yeah, this reactor is the slower of the two, but only barely. I believe it's about 2% downtime on the structure builder reactor. So this is a very balanced solution in terms of how long it takes each reactor to do the job that I've given it. And yeah, in the end, I'm very proud to have 2 reactor solutions. These 2 are the ones that I created, then there's the 2 that IEEE made for this. I'm proud to have a 2 reactor solution, but I know that there are much better solutions out there by people who neglected one of these 2 inputs entirely. And I look forward to seeing similarly detailed explanations from them. I hope many are up for the task. And thanks for watching.